Hey, so in this episode of Fretonomics, we're going to talk about secondary dominant and breaking music theory rules. So it's pretty important to state what I mean by music theory rules first, because so many people get annoyed when I say this, or at least they have on TikTok before. What I'm saying is the rules here is just diatonic harmony. So playing chords and notes from within the diatonic key. So if I'm in C, the music theory rules would be I have to use the notes in the key of C. So all the chords have to have, even if they're weird chords, they still have to have diatonic notes in them. Right? They can't break those rules. So one of the first things I'll teach students to do once they can do that, and they can do that with seventh chords and triads and all that kind of stuff, is to understand one concept, which is dominant function. So dominant function is a little bit different to just a dominant chord, the 5 chord in the key. Dominant function is the purpose of the 5 chord wanting to take me back to the 1 chord in the key. And one of the cool things that you can start to do is you can borrow that dominant function, and we're going to create a secondary dominant type function called secondary dominant. And the concept of secondary dominant is that you have a target chord. And one of the most common uses of this is we might target the 6th chord in the key. So if I'm in C and I'm going to go to my A minor as my target chord, I can set up a secondary dominant of the A minor to create the same resolution I created with my dominant function from like G to C. That same kind of complete resolution, I can create that around the A instead. But I have to play the 5th of A, right? And put a dominant chord there where it shouldn't be. So I'm breaking my music theory rule that I set out at the start, which is that if I'm playing an E chord in this song, it should be minor. It should go there, but I'm gonna go, which will give me that resolution to A minor. And it's basically a very quick and small modulation. I'm going. Now, it's a modulation because that note that I changed from G to G sharp is changing the scale momentarily. As soon as I hit the A, I'm back into C. Right, now, if I take that concept, you could apply that to any chord in the key. If I'm in C and I want to go to my 4 chord, I can find the 5 of that F, which is C, and instead of making it major 7, which it should be, I can make it dominant, which then lets me resolve to the F. This is used all the time in jazz, but it's actually surprisingly used in heaps of music. Like I bring it up in Sleep Token all the time. They do it in different ways, but I'll get into some of those ways in a second. But the idea here is you're setting up secondary dominance. So if I'm going to chord 2, I've got my target chord. I know I'm going to go to D, so I'm going to set up my secondary dominant. If I want to go to 5, and I'm back to 1. And the Beatles, for example, use this so effectively. It gives you like a sense of nostalgia when you're listening to the music kind of instantly, because you predict what's going to happen, because that dominant chord, it's setting you up to go, I landed where I want to go. And you as a musician then have the choice to either to satisfy that resolution that people are predicting, or to subvert it and not go there, which happens too. So you can hear secondary dominance in songs. that don't resolve to where they're technically going to go, because people are subverting that expectation. My last point with this, the one I bring up a lot, there's kind of two here, is you can have inversions of those chords to make them feel like leading tones to things. So say I'm going to that 2 chord again, and I'm going to use the secondary dominant. I could play an inversion of that secondary dominant and get like which gives me that leading tone. Kind of thing. So I could so both of those were just inversions of the secondary dominant chord to land. The next one would be diminished substitutes. So diminished substitutes rely on the fact that you're treating the secondary dominant as a flat 9 extension. So if I'm going, so that was an A7 flat 9 leading to my 2 chord. So secondary dominant of the 2, 5 of 2 with a flat 9. And that flat 9 creates a diminished chord within my A7 chord. So here's my A7s. But the top of that chord with the flat 9 creates a diminished chord. And once you've got a diminished chord, they're symmetrical. So if I move that diminished around in minor thirds, they all have the same notes. So now I have this kind of like diminished substitute for a secondary dominant I can use to get me to that 2 chord. So I could go, right? So I'm targeting my chords with the concept of secondary dominant, but a diminished substitute for a secondary dominant. And now I've got all of these chords outside the key, breaking the music theory rules that I can start adding into my pieces. I always think of them as you're targeting a chord. So if I'm moving to my 6 chord, I'm thinking of diminished substitutes. Right? If I'm moving up to my 4 chord, I'm thinking of my secondary dominant, then my diminished subs. Right? And then you've got inversions as well. You might go, there, which is an inversion of a secondary dominant. It's got like a sweeter sound than the diminished substitute. And that gives you ways to insert rule-breaking chords into your music. I only say rules as a guideline to start breaking them. All rules are made to be broken within music theory, but I'm just treating it like a hierarchy. You learn your chords in the key, then you start thinking about how you can find chords outside that key. The next step from this would be something like modal interchange, modal mixture, where you can use like your parallel minor or you can use your modes. But again, you need a foundation before you can do that. You really need to understand modes really well. And understand minor really well, and how minor, relative minor is the major scale, but coming from a different perspective and how you can use that. Anyway, I'll do that in another video. I hope this helped. Please leave some comments. Let me know what you think. If I missed anything, other ways you could use secondary dominant that you think are cool. And I hope this helped. And thanks for watching. Please give it a like and consider subscribing. Cheers. See ya.